Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to GeekWatch, a subsidiary of the Monastery, the open bar of the internet. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and with me I have two of my good brothers here in the temple. We have making his technical GeekWatch debut. Technically
correct. The best kind of correct.
Yes.
The head honcho of Successor Games and the man creating hardcore games for hardcore gamers. Good brother Jack.
Hey, Mildra.
And in the blue corner we have the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadare Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence.
Too kind.
Good brother Xanatrix. It is June 5th. I plead the 5th.
Don't worry, I'll incriminate him for him. He's been having some technical difficulties tonight, which is why you don't see our lovely bubble faces from Discord, because Discord is shit.
Discord is being a shit to me today. Between the randomness that happened during that meeting earlier today, and whatever the hell happened, when we were getting set up, where none of us could hear any of us.
Yeah,
that was fun.
It's been real hit and miss, and this is not my opportunity to just sit here and bag on Discord, but I'm just surprised it's been hit and miss because it used to be fairly consistent.
Excuse me, Rick. I'm the tech guy here, and so I get to say the favorite phrase of I guess RVT and the Monastery in general. Technology! It likes to give us the middle finger.
Not wrong.
So, I am using StreamYard as a backup, and the only downside is, as mentioned, you don't see our icon bubbles, and I am in no mood to try and do some sort of grandiose overlay, because I'd probably have to get a subscription to StreamYard, and I am not doing that.
There are probably ways to do it with OBS, using different versions of screen capture leading into other different versions of screen capture.
But by that point it gets into Inception level territories of bullshit.
Yes. Something I have actually done with OBS back when I was during my ranting days.
Mm-hmm. However, now initially I was going to use this opportunity to cover and discuss the failings of a certain member of the Bat family. That was the initial plan. However, when I started to see the bigger picture, and then I decided to do some digging into the state of CW, which could be considered the relic of network television. I decided that I needed to pivot a little bit, and you know me, if I'm gonna pivot on this kind of thing, I want to cast the widest net I can.
Especially considering very, very recent events.
Right.
Yeah. So, for this week, the subject on the chopping block is the CW and their not-so-superhero shows. So, let me level with you. The main reason why we're doing this week is because of the fact that for those of you who've been under a rock, Warner was recently part of a purchase/merger into Warner Discovery, and that means the head of Discovery is now the head of Warner, that being David Zaslav. And he has been going through and doing a thorough inventory of everything that, in his mind, is not being a return on their investment. And one of the things that's been a target of his has been a lot of these superhero shows on the CW. Because
Basically, you don't have no bag, you get out the fucking house.
now, some of these were already on their way out. Black Lightning is already out, is already finished. Arrow finished years ago, but Batwoman, the something that probably should have gotten canceled 2 years ago or 3 years ago, has finally gotten the axe. Legends of Tomorrow also got the axe, which we'll talk about both, and Naomi also got the axe, which is a case of, wait, who?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't hear a peep from anyone talking about Naomi until the cancellation.
Naomi? Who's that?
Exactly. And I suppose a good place to start is we started to see that with Arrow, which I like Stephen Amell, and I have a great amount of respect for him for the fact that he was willing to take his knocks in not just one but two wrestling events. Because granted, one of them was with Christopher Daniels, who knows what the hell he's doing. If you're going to have anybody involved with it, it's definitely him, and he held his own pretty well with it. But the thing, but for me, there was one big problem that ended up happening with Arrow that really was a case of what the fuck are you guys doing? And that was, I want to say, season 3-ish. Don't quote me on that. When there was that fight with Ra's al Ghul, which, as an aside, trying to turn Green Arrow into Batman was destined to fail.
Yeah. Let's remember that Oliver McQueen is supposed to be the lighthearted of the two rich boys playing hero.
Yeah, and they tried to. I was already iffy about Arrow because it seemed like they were trying to make him into this weird hybrid of Batman and, dare I say it, Daredevil.
Which is kind of weird.
So I even before Arrow, I think that when we're talking about CW Super anything, we got to go back farther than that for just the failure that CW is. So I say the network itself, I don't know for me if it has ever produced anything of great significance. And their plunge into the DC universe, and then of course Arrow becoming the Arrowverse, just was a product of what CW always was, which is just these cheap off versions of the bottom of the barrel. And I'm saying that from totally my vantage point of how I feel about DC in general. But it's like, okay, how far can we scrape into the bottom of the barrel? And just produce really B quality this, that, and the other thing. And none of it from day one has caught any of my interest. And that comes before Arrow. CW in general just hasn't produced anything that I'm like, man, nice job, network.
From what I recall, CW was a merger between two networks. I know that one of them was UPN.
Mm-hmm.
I don't recall what the other one was off the top of my head.
I remember it just all came from UPN, but I do think you're right that there was a merger.
There was. It's just been so long. I don't remember what the other channel was. But the big problem is first off, you have the fact that a lot of the stuff looks very, very cheap. Which At the time that things got started, I could buy that for a bit, if only with the excuse of there's not many other options available. Um, yeah, and Crunch is right. The other one was WB. It was a merger between the whole Paramount wanted out of the network TV thing because UPN wasn't producing, and there was the merger with the WB channel, and well, when it came to what both of them had done before, they had their particular blemishes. I'd say WB had a better run, if only because this was when people liked Joss Whedon.
Back before he became the all singing, all dancing quip machine.
Mm-hmm. But of course, with UPN, the flagship was Voyager. Make of that what you will.
Right. Go ahead.
I could roast Voyager a new one, but Chuck Sonnenberg has been doing that for years, far better than I can.
And there's a special place that I have in my heart for Voyager. When it comes to what we had in that whole merger that I can recall. So Warner Brothers had some of those cartoons that they were originally running at that time, even Animaniacs and Tiny Toons, I think. So they had stuff, and then but the big things that came from the merger that I remember, if I'm recalling correctly, is that we were left with Smallville, of course, Seventh Heaven, and Gilmore Girls. Those were like their big things. Was there anything else that was huge from them? I don't think so.
No. UPN did have SmackDown.
Okay.
For a cup of coffee before they decided to play hot potato with that. And when I think Smallville provides a good contrast because of one problem we're going to see in a bit. The early seasons of Smallville, I liked.
Me too.
But once they started introducing more and more characters and it became less of this origin story of Clark Kent.
Yeah.
It
started the digging the bottom of the barrel conversation.
Yeah, and so I can understand doing that with some of the supporting cast with the Superman family, but once you're trying to turn it into your version of the Justice League and trying to bring in people like Cyborg into it, which I think the only reason they were doing that was because of how popular the Teen Titans cartoon was at the time. That's when things got really out of hand, and it just kind of drifted. I know the saying is overused, but too many cooks can spoil the broth.
Totally.
Now,
and in fact, just real quick on that point, I think that you and I have talked about this before, Mildred. When you just don't have a captain of anything, and you're trying to set up any sort of verse, whatever that looks like, and in this case, we're talking about the Arrowverse, and you have nobody who is the go-to that's running that ship, then you are just flooded with whatever you're just throwing into this.
Yeah. Now, getting to Arrow, when the reason why I specifically focus on the fight with Raish is they ended off with him seemingly getting stabbed in the stomach and thrown off a high angle. Then they afterwards retcon it that he got stabbed in the shoulder and the fall wasn't that high. And I'm like, okay, now you've gotten to a point where you're not writing to anything but next week.
Right. But again, that's a little bit of CW's format. We're not writing any sort of arc. We're not going anywhere with this. This is episode to episode. We have a lot of different people working on the shows. Let's just get out what we're going to get out.
And
here's the
problem.
If you're going to bag on Voyager, that was a lot of problem with Voyager.
Well, there were a lot of problems with Voyager, and Ron Moore's interview with Elcars illuminated a lot of the problems, especially the haphazard by design nature of the show. His words. But what I want to highlight is that particular style of a lot of episodes and writing in a non-serialized format, that's something that you may have been able to get away with 20 years ago. Maybe. You could especially get away with it 25 years ago in the 90s. You cannot really get away with... You could not get away with that in the 2010s.
And you certainly can't get away with it now.
No.
Like, and I know we'll get to Aquaman, but it's like, come on.
The point that I'm getting at is that the zeitgeist with how shows are produced, especially shows that end up in conversation, over the last 20 years we have seen a shift to more serialized dramas that focus on less episodes of higher production. And especially in cases where with something like, say, let's use the better seasons of Game of Thrones as an example.
Right.
You'd probably wouldn't get any more than 15 episodes for a single season. But each episode is about 45 minutes.
Right. And I think that we've really proven that that's what people have become more interested in, is these very high... I mean, I know we had our own conversation about Wheel of Time on another cast, but that still you're talking about higher quality, shorter, meaning smaller amount of episodes, and longer episodes. And I think that the idea that we can essentially watch a mini series or a mini series of movies, short movies on television now is fantastic. Stranger Things, Umbrella Academy, those things work because of that.
Now, granted, that model has its own problems, the what
Correct.
happens next syndrome, but that's a story for another time.
Yeah.
What I do want to focus on with that is the fact that because of the fact that they're not writing long term, they're lacking something that Zan and I have talked about almost to the point of annoyance to some, but I'm going to keep bringing it up as long as it keeps fucking applying. You need to have a series Bible.
I can't even say how much I wholeheartedly agree. If you do not have a codex of what you're trying to put together with any given thing, especially when you're dealing with multiple shows in some sort of verse, come on, you're not going to win.
I know some people might say, but that there isn't that much of a series Bible when it comes to the comic books from issue to issue. One, yes, there is.
Yes,
Two,
there is.
Just because well, we see the sales figures for the comics industry, so especially the big two. So you really want to use that as your example,
right?
But I do want to highlight the whole thing of trying to make Arrow Batman, and this is the case of I think people only put up with it early on because of the fact that there wasn't a whole lot of options. And I think for a lot of people, they weren't as familiar with Oliver Queen and stuff like
of course
Justice
not.
League
Yeah.
Unlimited.
Yes. And when we're talking about people who are familiar with DC as far as the larger American audience, the, Green Arrow is way so far down the priority list for people that unless you make him into something that feels familiar to the larger American audience, then they have no basis of reference for Arrow at all whatsoever. So, okay, we'll make him more like Batman, and we'll throw in a little of this Daredevil vibes so that people have context for this character to build on. Okay, I got it. And then give us Arrow. Then, if you need to have us latch on to, whatever protagonist you're latching onto and start developing a hero's journey, start taking us on that hero's journey right away. As soon as you have us going like, okay, we have enough familiarity with something that we're familiar with so I can mentally relate to it. Yep. We'll go down the path of the hero's journey of this character now. But that didn't happen.
The thing is, for the first few seasons, you had, and this is something I saw with another entry, which we'll get to. You had a very strong story that was told and eventually wrapped up as it appeared. But then Avengers made bank, so I guess CW was like, we need another season. Where do we go from there? I don't care, just do it.
And we need a verse, Let's start making other shows.
Yeah, and when it comes to the idea of a rogues gallery of allies and enemies, this is where we started to see one issue that would become a repeat problem throughout a lot of these shows, and that is the idea of having a support team, and it's always the same set of characters.
Always,
and that's part of my bigger problem with the superhero genre on film and television. I'm tired of these stories, and I'm tired of them being told even in new ways. I'm tired of it, and I don't mean that I don't love these characters. They're still some of my favorite things, but that it's been done, and we've told the story.
For me personally,
please, for God's sakes.
For me personally, what I'm tired of is this idea that we need to have this idea of needing to have team stories. I would much rather have a story that focuses on a much smaller cast. And if you need a case in point, even though it had its stumbling points, and even though I think it should have ended earlier than it did, I actually liked the Batman. As far, and of course with this I have to clarify, I'm referring to the recent film, not the cartoon in the early 2000s. Although that's. But
I think a lot of people felt that way, whether it went on and on or not. There was a lot of people that were fans of Batman and not, that appreciated the focus that it had, as opposed to just throwing everything you can at something. Okay, it's Batman, so let's have like 10 of his villains and 13 of his sidekicks, and I can't follow a hero's journey if that's what you're going to do to me.
Now, if you want to shift between the hero. From the hero's journey completion to the master's journey, that's perfectly fine.
Sure.
Like I'm not saying that once you complete the hero's journey that's where the story should be over and you shouldn't write anything further. No, there's plenty of stories you can tell after you finish the hero's journey. And I will note that when it comes to that team issue, Legends of Tomorrow is the exception in that case, because it's built as a team affair right from the get-go. That doesn't save it from some of the other problems that we have, but that is the case. But speaking of that whole thing of muddying the waters, that's a good point to bring up the whole crossover thing. Doing the first one, the crossover with Arrow and Flash, that ended up working because it was fresh. However, when they decide to try and make these crossovers a yearly thing, they lose their punch.
Well, not only that, but the point of more hands in the pot is apropos, because when they first start any of these crossovers, and I'll include the Marvel movies and any other verse that we're talking about, when it initially starts, you have a small number of people who are involved in that decision-making process. You usually have still a captain at that point. But the further it goes along, the more hands are in the pot. Everybody wants to be the captain, and it becomes so muddied and inconsistent that do they think so what I wonder sometimes around all of this is, do they think an audience who actually cares about these characters, and most of us who are actually going to be your it factor, meaning your target market, and we're going to bring everybody else along with us because we love this stuff that much, do you think that we just don't pay attention to these things at all? Because that's not accurate.
When I will probably send you that Elcar's interview that Ron Moore did.
Okay.
But and for context, that was shortly after he did Equinox on Voyager and decided, you know what? I think it's time I take a break from star related stuff. For a few years at least, until he came back for Battlestar Galactica.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But he had mentioned being frustrated with this whole attitude that Berman and Braga had, that they didn't want to bog people down in continuity because they wanted people to just come in and watch. And he had said in regard to that what they're basically saying is, we don't care, and we're telling you flat out that we don't care.
Not only that, but they're what they would try to argue. The point that they would try to argue is that no, Star Trek was always based episodically, and a lot of these other CW included, they try to argue that point. Well, this is an episodic series. It is not meant for the continuity that you're talking about. It's meant to be this very short story, and then this very short story, and this. That worked for Star Trek in the 60s because Roddenberry was trying to make very, very pointed statements. And using sci-fi to make his pointed statements. So those individual episodes were all about an episode about, racism, black and white species, one half, and the other was the opposite side, and how ridiculous it is that they're killing each other, all the way down to the last two of the species. Because the episode is trying to make a point in using science fiction to make a point, and so therefore using Captain Kirk's hero's journey to let us watch a very, very poignant point without it being preachy at us, because we're just watching science fiction. That works for that episodic concept that Roddenberry was going for. That doesn't work when you're just trying to entertain for the sake of entertaining. If there's no continuity, then how am I entertained by this whatsoever? Like, this character was doing something entirely different just the last episode. What's happening?
The funny thing about that is, because of say TOS Star Trek, or even to an extent TNG Star Trek, at least to a point, doing the wagon train to the stars, i.e. the thing that Gene used to con CBS into letting him do this,
right?
You can get away with having essentially a season that is a collection of short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the fact that you're going to a new place every week.
Yep.
But with a superhero show, and especially with the ones that are chosen, these type of superheroes don't venture out of their core city. True. Superman isn't supposed to be venturing all out of Metropolis all that much. Okay, bad example, but I think you get my point.
Right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that because of that, you can't really do that kind of story. Or at the very least, if you're going to do it, you need to commit to it by actually having each one feel unique instead of feeling sameish. It's a case of trying to have your cake and eat it too.
Mm.
And then the other problem when they started bringing in all the teams and the like is that you have your quote unquote protagonists acting more reactive or even acting by committee rather than being proactive.
Absolutely. And here's the thing that I'll say about that is that because you do not have you're writing characters that have no, I don't know better words to use for it than this, no core value at all. So therefore they have nothing that they're really standing for. And I'm going to use Soups as the example for this because there is no such thing as truth, justice, and the American way when it comes to Soups in any way, shape, or form. So therefore, I don't have anything to take this character on any sort of, hey, this is the thing that they stand for. So therefore, I can create all kinds of things, but that will always be my thing that I can go. No, now we have a Soups that's values changes every single episode. So, you know what? And Soups is the example that I'm using, but we can use it for all of them. So what does Arrow stand for? Okay. Well, what does Batwoman or any of these, what core values? And if you don't want to make it, and I can have a whole conversation about why they're not going to have a truth, justice, and American way value system when it comes to any of these superheroes any longer. But come up with something so that we know who this person is. I don't know who any of these characters of the CW. I don't know who these guys are. So why? Of course, you can't be consistent in their storytelling.
And something else that ended up happening is what I like to call too many metahumans. All of a sudden, more and more people with characters that have some degree of superpowers, having the majority of the supporting cast have superpowers themselves can ruin the uniqueness factor.
Well, and in the actual comics themselves, a lot of the helper characters were just normal people helping more front and center superheroes. I mean, you just have to look at, Superman's best friend Jimmy Olsen.
Yep. But again, we can't have that because that implies if we're a modern network trying to tell stories in a place where entertainment is no longer based on any sort of or the value system has changed to where the value system means everybody has to be on the same page. So everything has to be the equal playing field. Everything has to be the team effort. Everything has to be all those things. Then they all have to be superheroes because there cannot be one that's better than the. Otherwise, people start having conversation. Well, that one is better than the Jimmy Olsens. So we can't have that. So then they all got to be metahumans. They all got to be superheroes. But that doesn't work. And that doesn't. Jimmy Olsen is not diminished in his role by the fact that he doesn't have superpowers. Come on.
Yeah, it's actually having normals helping out the supers helps to elevate the normals just as much as it does the supers.
Exactly.
Of course, there's one really good way to put the value change that you're talking about here, and that's to quote a fantastic Pixar movie, "When everyone's super, no one is."
Right.
And I'm not saying that you can't have a team story about a bunch of superheroes. Hell, I grew up in the 90s. I was a big fan of X-Men.
Yeah, of course.
Justice League.
Of course. I mean, Avengers. Yes, great. I'm not saying that superhero teams are a bad thing in any way, shape, or form.
With each of those, you are building around that right out of the damn gate.
Yes. And you're still talking about having a value system. Oh, you mentioned the X-Men. So we're going to have this conversation about where you do have the fact that they are metahumans versus the regular world and the bigotry, hate, discrimination against them because of the state of being that they are called mutant. Okay, great. Now we're still having a value conversation that we can continue to tell stories and we'll always be able to come back to, because Professor X will always have this same conversation called whether or not they hate us, we will protect them, we will serve them, we will. So that's the value system that the X-Men are going to continually be based on. But if there is no value system, we're just telling episodic stories, then who are these characters and why do I care about them?
Mm-hmm. Now, I will admit the other reason why I will give at least a little bit of slack to Legends of Tomorrow is giving a second chance to Constantine. Because yes, I'm still going to be salty about how that show got done dirty by NBC. Especially since that was the closest we got to a proper a proper adaptation of John Constantine.
Yeah.
I can hear people in the background now. You mean the Keanu Reeves movie?
No.
No, that's not what we're talking about.
Anybody who brings up the Keanu Reeves movie with me will be keelhauled.
It's a good Keanu Reeves movie, but that's not John Constantine.
Yeah. I don't hate it. But it is as far removed from the character of Constantine as you can get.
It's as far removed from the character of Constantine as the Disney Plus Moon Knight adaptation is removed from the character of Mark Spector.
And Crunch makes a good point when it comes to the whole X versus X hate thing. First off, I feel like the way that this particular universe was set up, there's not really a way to build that. And of course, there's also the fact that that you shouldn't be doing the same thing in two different shows. Which even more than a series Bible, if you're going to be doing multiple shows that are going to be in this shared universe, I do think having the runners from each shows at least have meetings with each other is paramount. So nobody's stepping on each other's toes.
Yourself. I mean, like, okay, i.e. Mandalorian and Obi-Wan, this taking care of a little kid, so wait, what? Or are we just what? What's happening? So yes, when they're telling the same story and not talking to each other, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that in mind, I think I would like to now. You mentioned earlier bottom of the barrel, and I can see that with some characters and a little bit less so with others.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the big examples for me when it comes to why would you pick him of all people is Black Lightning.
Yeah.
Well, Monk, don't you know? Representation.
Then why the fuck did you not get Static?
Sure, exactly.
Because he doesn't have black in his name.
That's true.
Because if I'm being honest, even as much of a comic book fan as I am, I can't recall a whole lot of people reading Black Lightning's stuff.
No.
More often than not, I would see him showing up in group work.
Yeah. if and so very rarely on top of it. And then you have and when you're talking about representation, okay, great. Then you have this very beloved character, Static, beloved by the community that character represents, by the community that character represents, and the artists that draw those characters, and meaning all of my fellow artists who work in the industry. And when those people of said community want to draw something from their community, guess who they're drawing? Static. And you're not going to use that character that this community that you're wanting to represent because you're being you're telling an equity and diversity story. you don't want to use the character that community actually cares about, then something is terribly wrong.
One that even putting aside diversity gobbledygook.
Yeah.
You have a character that already has a following in that case.
Yeah.
And that following would probably jump at the chance of seeing a return or some sort of live actionness. Even if there is the risk of backlash, you would get more eyes on you than I'd imagine with someone like Black Lightning.
Right.
Of course, we all know why they wouldn't use Jon Stewart. Because of the unfortunate box office flub starring Ryan Reynolds.
Oh.
Green Lantern didn't do so well in theaters. Maybe we should make
didn't.
a Green Lantern TV show then.
Yeah.
I actually think a Green Lantern TV show would be very interesting because
it would be much better than
we
any
had
movie
the
that they
Green
ever
Lantern
did.
animated series, and that was really good.
Was excellent.
Exactly.
Again, we're talking about what they've done. So that's a great example. I'm glad you brought it up because DC has done a stellar job when it comes to animation. Some of my favorite artists in the industry and very dear friends have worked on all of those shows, and brilliant on so many levels, from the writing to the storyboarding to the actual animation itself. Spot on in so many cases. That is not challenging to bring that level of energy to writing and film and acting as a human being. What's the disconnect?
Mm-hmm. Now,
well, if we're being perfectly honest, the disconnect is the same thing you have a disconnect with whenever you have superpowers in live action. It's just easier and more multidimensional in animation because there's so much more you can do with animation. But that, with something as widely budgeted as these CW shows were, you could probably do something really good.
And yes, but that's not what makes those animated series around these same characters fantastic, is because of how a certain ability is drawn in a certain scene. It is because of the stories that they're telling about these characters. That's the disconnect. Why can't you tell fantastic stories about these characters that we love or don't, depending on who's a fan or not a fan, you're still driving your it factor. Whoever your target market is has to be the people that absolutely love these guys and telling great stories, great character stories about these guys. Though that target market, that it factor is going to bring everybody else along. That's just how it works. But if you're telling shitty stories about these okay characters and they're kind of okay in the first place, then boy, that's a huge disconnect from what they're doing in animation. And that has nothing to do with production value.
Mm-hmm. Now, with that in mind, I'd like to shift a bit into Batwoman, because I'd say this was the real what the fuck level of jumping the shark. Because first off, while Batwoman had been rising in popularity until Dan DiDio decided to do a Dan DiDio. With that whole superheroes aren't allowed to have happy lives bullshit.
Mm.
That was his excuse for why they couldn't do Batwoman getting married.
Oh.
And there were first off, the idea of treating the Batman suit as if it's fucking Excalibur, like what the hell are you doing?
The Batsuit is no more Excalibur than the lantern rings are mass produced, because the Batsuit was made mass produced during the Batman Inc. arc.
Mm-hmm. Of course, then they ended up using they end up using Batwing midway through. But there's been this whole thing of they really want to use Batman, but for whatever reason they don't want to pull the trigger on it. So you get stuff like Gotham, or you get stuff like Batwoman, and if
I think they what it is they want to save Batman for just cinema.
if that's the case, don't then stay out of Gotham.
Yeah. I personally
stay
think
out of Gotham, or why was it just not okay? And I know the answer, but why was it just not okay instead of telling Kate Kane's story? Why was it not okay to tell Batgirl's story?
That is a very good question.
It's one we won't get an answer to.
Especially since I'd say a Batgirl story would probably get more eyes on, because more people.
Of course
it
would, because if you're talking about the it factor that you should be focused on, because they're going to bring the rest of the audience in, they care about Barbara, they care about Batgirl, they care about Gordon, they care. That's the stuff that they care about, and they will bring the rest of the audience along. But you're not willing to tell a story about, that girl, and we're definitely not going to use the word girl. So we've got to go towards something else entirely and talk about
use
empowerment.
The fucking Birds of Prey.
Thank you. There would have been ways around it, or just tell Batgirl's story. It's a great story.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, we're probably not going to get any answers, but from what it seems like to me, even more than Superman, Batman is just like, for them, a silver screen icon.
Truly.
Because
I was able to understand this while the Nolan Batman movies were still in the running. Not wanting to create brand dilution or anything like that.
Yeah, but I'm not butting, Monk. I'm the attitude we've seen around Batman as a property for film and that type of media. The last time we had a live action Batman TV show, I think, was West.
Right, correct. That is absolutely it. But I think that's their problem, is that's how they still in their head see, yeah, that's what it would be if we did something. I mean, other than the one where the Batman's a kid, but but it would be, everybody would see it as the West version of Batman. No, they wouldn't.
Most of the people who would be tuning in were probably not even fucking alive when the West Batman came out. Yeah. I wasn't alive when it came out, for fuck's sake.
Or you know what? To be honest with you, and this is what DC, my bigger problem with DC overarching is their inability to be what they are, which is effing campy. That DC superheroes are campy, goofy, and yeah, you know what? I would actually enjoy a Batman movie that was like, or a Batman show that was like West, than any sort of contrived garbage where they tried to put this very, very modern twist on Batman. Why not be the campy goofiness that you are? Because comparatively to Marvel, DC has always been campy and goofy.
I mean, they're both campy and goofy in their own ways.
Accurate.
And I guess that's what I'm trying to exemplify here, is that ever since then, Batman has been silver screen only. And in almost all silver screen appearances, it's been the Dark Knight, the dark brooding guy.
Mm-hmm.
Without any of the funny things like Batman walking around on Christmas Eve asking if anybody's seen the Joker through a damn megaphone. World's greatest detective, everybody, by the way. But even Superman, like arguably the poster boy, the American Boy Scout poster boy of one of DC's 3 flagships, got live action TV shows. Yeah. I still miss Dean Cain as Superman. I grew up watching that shit. And it did play into the camp a lot of the time.
Yeah, exactly.
But they also got Smallville, and Smallville was actually really good.
It was. Monk was right. The beginning of that show was very good, especially because you're talking about character stories between Kent and especially Luthor. Fantastic.
But also, I can't not like Henry Cavill in whatever he plays. So even though Man of Steel as an entire movie is
Mid.
all the parts with Henry Cavill on screen are actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So long as he's the one doing the acting.
Yeah.
But I'm pretty sure, Zan, I'm pretty sure you saw the same rumor mill that I did about the behind the scenes situation with Batwoman.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't blame the original actress for the fact that she wanted to nope out if the working conditions were that level of unsafe. I'd probably say fuck. I'd probably tell them fuck off myself.
I tell them, are you going to pay me triple for hazard pay? No. Okay, I'm gone. Bye.
Yeah, I wasn't well aware of that, but yes, and I mean, do you really want? We've had enough accidents on sets to such extreme degrees as death has been involved. Like, really? Why is anyone risking anything like that?
But the actress they got to replace her, she was just in a position of having to make chicken salad out of chicken shit.
Yeah.
And and of course as soon as she came in, then the gaslighting started, which anytime I see anybody in Hollywood or the like complaining about nasty comments that they get, my instinct is to go fake and gay.
Yep.
My instinct is to go, you're a public figure, and people are going to hate on you. It's been that way since time immemorial.
Yep.
Yeah, we've just seen so many times where it seems that people are trying to gaslight and shift the conversation away from legitimate criticism into this who shot John bullshit.
Yeah.
Yep.
I realize I probably dated myself making a Dallas joke, but I don't care.
You didn't date yourself to me, which dates me.
I plead the fifth.
And when it came to personally, I remember looking at the ratings and I was going, why the hell is Batwoman still on the air? Because they could barely crack a 1. They were I think they were at around 800,000 by the time season 3 rolled around.
Yeah, I don't. You're better at me at stuff like keeping track of ratings, but I again, when it comes to having we're going to have certain shows that are going to have strong male characters and equally have to have shows with strong female characters. So the number, if they got rid of Batwoman, the number would be off for how many female main characters versus male main characters.
Well,
so
there's obviously the discussion of demographic, but I don't always have access to those numbers. But at the same time, for me, it's just a case of the only people who are paying a whole lot of attention are people who are lambasting it or people who it's their job. It didn't exactly it. And the problem with using a character like Batwoman is she doesn't have a proper rogues gallery.
Not even a little.
Anything that can come close is piggybacking off of
Batman.
Off of Batman.
Yeah.
And when she's a part of the Bat family, there's nothing wrong with that. But when you're trying to have her be her own thing, then you have a problem.
Because you just caused the unconscious comparisons between her and Batman.
That's right.
And that's a fight that you're going to lose no matter who you are.
So you mean as far as the writers are concerned?
I mean in terms of if people are seeing you as a poor man's Batman, then you're kind of screwed.
That's right. Unless, and I will bring it back to the writers, unless you truly tell unique stories about this character and create their own hero's journeys based on their value system. And it can't be Batman's. So if we're going to really tell a new character with Batman's suit on, it has to be so radically their own with their own true rogues gallery. And how about this? Try not taking one damn thing from a comic book. You're making a television series. You've created an Arrowverse. Start coming up with a new rogues gallery.
Mm-hmm. And they tried, but a lot of their quote unquote new rogues gallery was carbon copies of. Well,
that's what I'm saying. That's not new.
Yeah. That's only new in the same way that you put brand new lipstick on a pig.
Mm-hmm.
And now Slick Rick points out something interesting, that he'd accept a TV show focused on the GCPD, and saying that was the idea for Gotham. But it'd be better than Batwoman. I'm still not entirely sure what the core direction with Gotham was, except for just a bunch of moving parts.
Yeah.
And if you want to do Law and Order Gotham Edition, then do it.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. So like things like Gotham, is to me like comparable to Book of Boba Fett, where, oh man, doesn't this sound really cool, guys? Does this is a really cool idea? No direction to it at all, no overarching anything, no character story that you want to tell, just a really cool idea in very poor or mid execution.
Mm-hmm.
Stop making shows off of just a cool idea, guys. Please.
There's a reason I stopped using the phrase "wouldn't it be cool if" when it comes to writing in that regard, because that's only the start. No man can live on just eating seeds.
No.
Sunflower or otherwise. I don't even like sunflower seeds.
Not even with your beer? Come on now.
No.
So what about the elephant in the room called Herd and Mira and Aquaman?
Well, that's not
exactly
CW related,
CW.
I'll probably end up discussing that another day.
Okay.
Yeah.
DC related, not CW.
Yeah.
Got it.
We could talk about Ezra Miller, though.
I'd rather not.
And say we didn't.
I will, however, talk about somebody had asked me why I didn't care for Supergirl. The answer to that is quite simple. That wasn't Supergirl.
Thank you.
That was a Rule 63 Clark Kent.
That wasn't his cousin. That was just him, as if he had tits.
Mm-hmm.
And
again, Batgirl to Batwoman, this comparative, Supergirl's a great character.
Yeah, she is.
So
there's a lot that I like about her, especially especially the whole angle of her not really fitting in because she wasn't raised on Earth the way Clark was.
Right.
Yeah, she was saved from Brainiac, but in the bottled city, which of course means that she still has mostly Kryptonian values.
And that's the reason why she's jumped around between groups, teams, and whatever, because she doesn't quite fit in. But that's not the story that they tried to tell.
No.
The story that they tried to tell was one where she's trying to do the mild-mannered reporter thing, like Clark Kent, trying to do the secret identity with the glasses thing, like Clark Kent, and trying to do the just off the boat into the big city thing,
Like Clark Kent.
Like Clark Kent.
And that doesn't fit because Supergirl's story is a fish out of water story.
Yeah.
It's always been that way. It's been, a Kryptonian saved from the bottled city to her actual cousin. But because I get the feeling that they just didn't know what to do.
No, yes, there's that, and they don't care about these characters, and I'm saying that they don't see these characters in the same way the fan of these characters is. And remember that they've forgotten, so I say, that the fan is what's going to bring the entire audience along. They're the ones that are going to talk it. If they took care of, I'll use her as an example. If they took care of the Supergirl character in that way, really told this fish out of water story that everybody who loves her loves about her, then those people that love her would be like, oh man, this is the best. And they're telling everyone that they know, man, there's this amazing version, film adaptation of the Supergirl story. And then everybody's watching it along with them. Mm-hmm. They have forgotten to take care of the thing that they're making the show about. They're just going, oh man, it's super popular to do superheroes. So Supergirl is one of them. It's a female, and that's representation. But people like Superman, so let's just make her a female Clark Kent. Nobody's gonna watch the show.
And the people who do watch the show that don't know about that, as Crunch rightfully points out, aren't going to know about the fish out of water story that is really, really good.
Correct.
This is the reason why I'm always iffy about making these vast changes from one medium to another. I'm not saying you have to be slavish. We talked about how the slavish to the source material thing is nothing but a red herring.
Yeah.
In the episode on Wheel of Time. At the same time, however, when the primary audience that is going to stick around for something like a superhero show are people who are familiar with said superhero, or they're familiar with the cast or something, or they're familiar with the channel that it's on, something like that. Some sort of fan is going to be the one that sticks around. You're not going to magically get a whole bunch of new fans out of the gate for this new interpretation. You might get some, but they're going to be
some.
But this is what I like to call the greener grass fallacy.
Mm-hmm.
The grass may be greener on the other side, but that's only because of all the radiation.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'd like to point out that the version of Supergirl done in Smallville was actually really good because it was still mostly a fish out of water story, primarily because instead of being saved from the bottled city of Cantor, she's a transplant from the Infinite Crisis.
Right. And so that's a great example of you don't have to have you don't have to follow the source material exactly, but if you have altered the character beyond recognition, well, what am I watching now? I'm just watching a female Clark Kent. How
Yeah.
boring. I want to see, but in Smallville, you're right. So I can still tell a fish out of water story in the context that I've established the universe of Smallville in, but it's still Supergirl's story.
Mm-hmm. And I know some people might be tempted to bring up Superman and Lois. Superman and Lois is an exception because that isn't a CW show. It airs first on HBO Max.
Okay, but isn't it part of the Arrowverse or no?
No.
Okay.
When it's on CW, it's essentially the equivalent of sloppy seconds.
So they've never done crossovers into Lois and Clark? Not that I mean, I don't know. I was just curious. No, okay.
No, it was built as its own thing originally on HBO Max, and eventually episodes of it aired on CW.
Got it.
Which is probably also but the other thing is and I think this is one of the big reasons why a lot of these CW shows keep failing. Warner may license out the characters, but they're not involved in the actual storytelling.
No.
Whereas with something like Superman and Lois, they are more involved in the storytelling and the writing. And when it comes to the storytelling and writing, you have people from Viacom and CBS.
I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
Well, in both cases, their Viacom and CBS are which are pretty much the same entity these days. They've been in some political bitch fighting for the last few years. And which goes back to that point that we mentioned earlier, too many cooks in the kitchen. And you need somebody who has a strong vision when it comes to these kind of things. Otherwise, it's a case of what exactly are we doing? Where are we going?
You need to know where. You need to have a good idea where you're going and how you're going to get there and who you're going to do it with.
Yeah. Another major issue that someone had brought up is the gradual CWification. I know that's not a word, but that's the closest I can come up with. Where all of a sudden the focus was instead of being on the hero doing hero things, became far more important to do these soap opera style stories or these shipping style stories.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, you're talking about a network that built its money off of Seventh Heaven and Gilmore Girls, and that's what these. You're right. That's what these guys. They're superhero stories, but they're really essentially that type of show.
Mm-hmm. And if that's the this is the case where working with what you know can't really help if you're in something where what you know doesn't apply, and if you don't have anybody in that spot that knows this kind of material, then hire somebody who does.
Yes.
I guarantee you will find no shortage of writers who would love the opportunity to write for a popular superhero.
Mm-hmm. And Crunch actually points out another good point regarding the CW heroes here, that some of the biggest issues are none of the characters really feel like they grow. They reset every season.
Yes.
That is one of those artifacts from what I mentioned with Voyager. Voyager like to abuse the magic reset button, and they're still abusing the magic reset button.
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't help that Janeway's completely insane. So
true.
She doesn't read the logs of her officers clearly. Otherwise, Chakotay would never have been able to get that log past her in that one episode.
Accurate.
Mm-hmm. The other thing is when it comes to some of the ships. First off, let me get this out of the way. What's our policy on headcanons, Zan?
Headcanons, get the headcanon.
But because of the fact that they focus so much on them, one, it takes away from the whole superhero thing, and I feel like I'm watching a soap when I'm supposed to be watching a superhero doing superhero things.
This is not the last days of Krypton. This is, please actually have a real superhero story.
Yeah.
But also, some of the ships that they've tried to do are atrocious, and I'm specifically aiming my barbs at Iris, who was go away heat. Because I distinctly remember one particular instance where Barry ended up making a decision on his own, and Iris was pissy that they didn't make the decision together. Like, even though in that kind of situation he had very good reasons for doing what he did.
Very good reasons. They don't matter, Monk. There has to be drama.
Mm-hmm. And yeah.
And again, you can have good character interplay, and you can have good writing around, quote, drama, but it has to be consistent with who you say these characters are. And when it's not, and it's just for the sake of drama, because you are telling soap opera stories because you're the CW and that's just what you know, and those are the writers that you hire, no one's going to watch your stuff, and guess what? They're not. So keep doing that.
Once again, this is something that you could get away with when you had no competition.
There you go.
When the only thing you had was this for the small screen and the MCU on the big screen.
Yeah.
But as there's more and more shift into doing superhero stuff on streaming services, that's not something that you can really go with, and even more so when you're starting to see the onset phases of that particular type of superhero getting fatigue.
Cape shit fatigue is actually at pretty high bars these days.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen some people say that people are just sick of superheroes, period. I don't think that's exactly the case. I think this particular interpretation, this MCU style of formula and quippage and soap opera and all that, is what people are getting sick of.
Yes. And we've collectively been calling that cape shit for like the last 3 years now.
Mm-hmm. Hell, the fact that there's plenty of superhero indie comics that manage to do well for themselves,
right?
I think is an effective counter argument to the idea that people are fatigued on superheroes.
And the fact that Spawn is always popular. Although, I mean, you can't. Is that really surprising to anybody?
No.
And I have my severe doubts that anyone's ever going to try again when it comes to doing a live action or an animated Spawn.
Oh, they talk about it every once in a while.
Oh, come on!
You don't talk is cheap.
You don't want Crispy and Leguizamo back on the screen.
Leguizamo was the only decent part of that film, as far as the acting was concerned, but everything else is just terrible.
So I don't know if side note, I don't know if this is true or not, but Scuttlebutt was, anytime he was in clown mode as the Violator, he had to be on his knees in scenes.
Yeah. He had to be squatting all the way down. I mean, that's what he did too when he played that. What are they called? The one-eyed alien from Star Wars. He played one in that one episode of Mandalorian. He did the same squat thing that he did as the clown.
Hopefully he didn't have to eat slugs while doing it. Because that was a thing. That was a thing.
Yep.
Oh.
So this is my question for you, Monk. What do you think at this point in time the CW can do to salvage any of this, or is there nothing that can be done?
I think what you're going to see happening is you're going to see more and more CW supers go on the chopping block, and a lot of that material is going to get rebooted into the transfer to HBO Max. And when I say reboot, I don't mean some sort of soft reboot. I'm saying get out the Trimantial 2 team. We're blowing this shit up.
Yep. Okay, so if that's the case, and I'm not saying it shouldn't be done because I'm over whatever the CW has done with any of these characters, and my request would be to the superhero gods: don't do it. We're done with the reboots. If you need to tell a superhero story, find a writer who wants to tell a great story about something brand new.
Zaslav,
because I don't want to see anything. I don't want to see a new Batman story. I really don't.
Zaslav has expressed frustration that we have the most iconic trinity of superheroes
They do.
in our library. Why are we not doing anything with them?
Okay, so do they reboot and just tell that story?
I think instead what Zaslav is more interested in doing is trying to rebuild the Trinity.
Okay.
That's the rumor that's going about. As far as how that's going to happen, I have no clue.
Yeah.
But that's what I've been hearing. And truth be told, that is a fair thing to do. I do think that that before they can even consider trying to reboot or rebuild or what have you, they need to pick somebody as the captain of their DC ship.
Thank you.
And I doubt it's going to be Walter Hamada. He's not been doing a very good job. I think you're going to see another regime change. It was a good idea on paper to bring in Jeff Johns when they did early on, but the problem is I don't know where he ends and all the other people involved begin, especially the fact that for those early DC films when they were trying to do a cinematic universe of their own, the Nolan brothers were still involved as producers.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I like Christopher Nolan. I'm not so high on Jonathan Nolan. I like what David S. Goyer has made, even though I think he's a fucking idiot, and apparently Wesley Snipes hates him.
Really?
That's the reason besides the whole pissing off the IRS thing, why you're not going to see Snipes in Blade anytime soon.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened, but he really does not like David S. Goyer, and I don't like him either because he had decided to have that dumb take claiming that She-Hulk looks like a porn star.
Yeah.
Which was just really stupid. But Jeff Johns is a very good comic writer. I've liked plenty of his stuff, even with some of the flaws, especially Infinite Crisis and Blackest Night. Those are pretty good stories, even if they've got some serious holes.
Okay.
However, for some people, just can't make the transfer. It is a whole different ball game writing a comic and writing a TV script or a film script for that matter. And he just couldn't hack it.
So again, you say that there's plenty of writers who would jump at the shot to do this stuff. I don't doubt that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that there's any writer out there that will handle it with the care that the fans that would bring the audience along with them are going to appreciate. Where's that writer? Other than if you truly went independent on it and got a genuine, excuse the word, a genuine fanboy who was a very good writer and who very much cared about the characters and was just going to tell good stories about those characters and have no ego tied to it.
Mm-hmm. One of the rumors that's been going about,
and would production companies be willing to do anything like that ever? I don't know that we have an example of that.
One of the rumors that's been going about is the director of Joker is in consideration to be that guy, to be that captain of the ship. I think the main reason why he's in consideration is because of how much money Joker ended up making, especially since it was made on such a low budget.
Because good character story. And that's really all you need.
Mm-hmm. And if they do go with him, he's probably going to want to bring in people that he's worked with. Because you know how it is. The new boss comes in and he wants to work with people who he's been able to make money with.
Yeah. Or that he gets along with, enjoys creating with. I get it.
Mm-hmm. And I'd say the big problem is I think that there's plenty of people who would be willing to do it. The issue is it has been the political game, because for years there was the whole friction between Warner and their owners at the time with AT&T. Now, granted, nowadays you have one person helming the ship instead of the multiple camps, but there's still a lot of flotsam and jetsam that is in there that needs to be cleaned up, which is why you're seeing Zaslav do the hatchet job. And truth be told, if I were a betting man, Flash is next to get cut. It doesn't exactly help that Flash throughout its entire run only had one good villain. That being Professor Zoom. i.e. Reverse Flash. You all know the story.
Yeah.
The other attempts at villains in seasons afterwards felt like they were just trying to be the fastest man alive, because that's apparently what you're supposed to do as a speedster. And the worst example of this was Godspeed, who straight up, no bullshit, sounds like a Power Ranger villain. I mean, like all I could hear whenever he was ranting or monologuing was Lord Zed. And I mean no disrespect to the late Robert Axelrod with that, but that's what I fucking heard.
Now I have this picture of all these CW shows that we're talking about, and they just comparatively to Power Rangers, and that is really how sad that they are. And honestly, that sounds like I'm bagging on Power Rangers. I think in a lot of ways Power Rangers was better than some of these shows.
And Crunch brings up a good point. Also, the Speed Force lightsabers. You forgot the Speed Force shuriken.
Oh,
like,
right.
I remember seeing clips of that. I was like, "What the fuck is this?"
Wow.
Because that was a thing.
Yeah.
I would pick on the use of time travel with Flash, but I feel like that's a low bar because there are very few time travel stories that don't have problems. Like the only other one I can think of all things is Primer. And that was all the way back in 2004. I know I've mentioned that before. I know I've mentioned that in the past, but Primer is the most grounded time travel story that I know of.
So when you have self-contained time travel stories, that's when they work. They don't work when you have a series.
No, because inevitably you will fall in even in self-contained ones, like say Back to the Future, they inevitably fall under their own weight.
Yes.
It's especially the thing with time travel is that I'm not opposed to using it, but I would rather it be used sparingly. Unless time travel is the whole point and trying to figure out the continuity is pointless, a la Doctor Who.
Right. Time Lords.
Even Doctor Who tries to establish some form of continuity.
Tries. And so Star Trek is a fairly good example of that, where time travel is used fairly sparingly, except for in the new movies that were a whole other alternate universe to everything. But in general, they've used it sparingly in certain episodes, and then it's like, okay, well, I can buy it for this episode and move on.
Now, I'm not saying.
Of course, that says nothing about Picard and everything that's going on now, which I can't even watch. And here's the other thing too. So I'm going to just put this out there, and I know it's whatever it is, what it is. If they were to do this reboot that you're talking about, and we're talking about the Holy Trinity again, and doing it in today's media, in today's entertainment world, which one of them is going to be gay and which one of them is going to be a person of color? Because you certainly cannot have this white Superman and this white Batman and this white Wonder Woman. This is not going to work. It does work because it should be about just good storytelling, but that's not what media and entertainment is these days. So how does this work in a reboot? That's why I don't want them to do it. Just drop it.
I think they're going to, but I know that there was talk of having Michael B. Jordan be Clark Kent and have that be written by political hack Ta-Nehisi Coates, who I think had his comic book run canceled 3 times in the span of 2 years.
Yeah. And I'm not saying that wouldn't. Hey, as the only homo brother in the monastery, I have fine, great. Do that, include that, and say nothing about it. But if you're going to virtue signal all over the place that you now have a person of color Superman, then you have cheapened the whole thing. If you want to have a person of color who is Superman, then do it and say fucking nothing about it. And great. Then we have Superman who's a person of color, and that doesn't mean anything other than it's Superman. Yeah. But as soon as you virtue signal, I'm done. We're done with the story. I can't. It's over. It becomes about that and not about Superman or storytelling.
As an aside, I fucking hate the phrase "person of color." I legitimately do. Zan knows why. I know.
And I've said my piece, amen.
Yeah, but given how a lot of the stories that have been boasting about
looks
having
like Monk is muted at this time, actually.
God.
Did you mute yourself, Mildred?
No.
I'm like, I know Mildred has some good stuff to say about this.
Yeah, but I was just saying I fucking hate the phrase "person of color." I
do too. I'm using it because I don't want us to get whatever backlash we would get on the show, but I don't include.
Fuck 'em.
So great, have a black have a black Superman or
no. Hold on. The only reason Monk is saying he hates person of color is because he's black.
Fuck off.
Yes. See, we get to make a point with that joke this time, Monk. Otherwise, Otherwise, it's just me tormenting him. Now it's
we're-
me tormenting him, and there's a merit to the story.
No, but
Right.
no, but as far as whatever potential backlash we get for it, fuck them. We
Right.
are assholes. We are
I'm
opinionated
clear.
assholes. People
Not
can
to
disagree,
mention,
but we
not
are
to
still
mention-
assholes.
not to mention, person of color, guys. The 50s are calling. They want their colored person back.
Correct. I know. Seriously.
But if I'm being honest, considering how, let's consider this, the Son of Superman comic that tried to make a bunch of fucking headlines about Clark Kent's son
Mm-hmm.
being bi,
Mm-hmm.
which is really which the way they wrote it, it really felt like a.
It's tokenism. It was fucking tokenism the way they wrote it.
Not only was it tokenism, but from that community standpoint, me being a part of that community, it was not cute whatsoever. It was like, really, how daddy twink can you make this relationship? It's so bizarre and absurd. It's creepy.
It really comes off for me. That whole thing came off like a reason why you should not hire people based on their live journal fan fictions.
Thank you.
But the reason I wanted to bring that up is because you think, I'm pretty sure somebody thought, well now that there's this representation, people who feel that they weren't represented will flock to the comic.
No,
they didn't.
Tumbleweeds.
No. Fucking tumbleweeds. It's like what if they gave a war and nobody came?
And again, really, that comes down to the virtue signaling aspect of it. So I'll speak for myself. Me as a gay man, I have no desire for you to make money off of the fact that I'm a gay man because you want to point that, look at me, I did something good.
I'm pretty sure you have no interest in seeing a character who begins and ends with "I'm gay."
No, not even a little.
You want a character. You want somebody with, backstory and depth and
right.
emotions. And, you don't even have to say it. You don't even have to point it out. Maybe it's just a panel or some scenes of
Correct.
him holding hands with his boyfriend. Oh, he just so happens to be gay.
Correct.
It is not it's the beginning and end of his identity. It is
That's right.
piece. It is a piece of the larger puzzle that is this character.
Correct.
Hang on. And welcome the very late Einbrecht.
Yes.
Einbrecht, thanks for joining us.
I was asleep as shit.
Hello, Einbrecht. We've gotten to the tokenism aspects of parts of this at this point.
Yes.
Yeah,
but,
I heard Jer speaking on it, and I was just kind of nodding along, like, yes, tokenism sucks.
Yeah.
But an analogy that I've used plenty of times, and I will probably keep using, is the fact that I have mentioned plenty of times that my favorite captain throughout Star Trek is Benjamin Sisko.
Same.
Again, you're saying that because you're black.
Fuck off.
Yeah, this time I did it just to torment you.
But Sisko was never written to be the black captain.
No, he sure wasn't.
No, he was changed later on.
That's not to say him being black didn't come up. It just only came out when it was relevant. The more important things that came up were him being a very passionate individual, him having a high competitive streak, him being the son of a Creole chef, him being a man who loves baseball.
Yep.
Well,
Him being a man who wants to punch out Picard.
Yeah.
Yes, I was just going to say that.
You can't say that's not a defining trait for Sisko.
It absolutely is. I was going to say, look at his interaction with Picard in season 1 when he talks about the Battle of Wolf something.
Mm-hmm.
Wolf
359.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a phenomenal scene, and just
It
how
is.
uncomfortable both of them look. It's amazing.
It has nothing to do with the skin color of either of them.
Exactly, it has to do with the massacre of his crewmates because he was Picard was Locutus.
Picard was Locutus, and one of the people who who was unfortunately at that battle, was his wife.
Right.
Ethereal just pointed out he's also known for punching Q.
Yes.
Yeah.
That is right.
See, Cisco is kind of this combination of the idealism in some ways of Picard and the action hero of Kirk.
Of Kirk,
He
yes,
is,
he
and
was.
that's why I liked him so much.
Yep.
But
He could be both.
extremely flawed in both cases.
Yes.
Yes.
His flaws helped define him,
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
especially the way he overcame some of them.
Yes.
And
again, but of course, again, you're talking about them having not only a value system for Cisco and who he is as a flawed character and the values that he has. What we were talking about before, how you define a character that way, and that's consistent throughout a series. And you have this overarching, I have the end of the story called that he's the emissary. So that whole hero's journey to the end of that story called the emissary is what you're telling. So you have an end game. None of these CW shows have an end game whatsoever.
No, and I think a lot of people hyper focus on the wrong parts on the idea of an end game. Because when I brought that whole end game thing up to others, the counter argument that I hear is that I want them to do a few things and then retire. No. Let me use a bit of an example. An example from the lore of the GeekWatch. Because we've been doing this for 84 episodes. We got to have lore by this point.
I just thought the lore was for a bunch of batshit bastards talking about whatever the fuck we please.
Hey, if Black Pants can have lore, then so can we.
This is true.
But consider when we did the reconstruction of Captain Marvel.
Yeah.
And even though Doku strongly objected to me on this, we had set that after Endgame instead of before it.
Mm-hmm.
Largely because I'd put my foot down on this. There were more stories to tell then without having to worry about getting sandwiched and have the potential story that we could tell be bottlenecked, but also to use that as the groundwork for how we would tackle a hypothetical Phase 4.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
One that was a Phase 4 that, in the aftermath of everything that happened with Endgame and the fact that now most people on Earth know that they're not alone in the universe, you have very uncertain times, which I felt is the most fertile ground for the Secret Invasion story.
It is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And that's the angle we wanted to take it with our version of Captain Marvel, was more about how that was going to go down, and
especially make it clear that both the Skrull and the Kree are not nice people.
yeah,
Right.
definitely.
You could also follow it up with the Kree Skrull War, because at that point it would be relevant.
Yeah, I wanted to go with Secret Invasion to play off of that uncertainty and possible paranoia.
No, it's absolutely the right time for that particular story. I'm just saying afterwards, after it's concluded.
The point is that with a good story in any sort of long running affair, you are wrapping up one particular story, but you are leaving the seeds for the story that's to come.
Absolutely.
And that actually, if I'm going to use more GeekWatch lore, it's a bit of terminology that we use all the time, especially when we're doing multi-stage reconstructions, where the big arc ends. You've reached the end of that story, and you reset the game board.
Yes.
That is what we mean when we say, okay, reach an end point. You've reset the game board to start it, to bring everything back to status quo, and now you can start building a different story. Whatever that might be.
So not a reset. Okay, now I hear what you're saying. So at first I thought you were talking about people that just blow up the board and then restart. No, you're right. It's the foundation for the new game.
Yeah, we're not talking about like a complete reboot where you like you said, you blow up the game board and start with a different game. No, we're talking about you've just finished that game of chess. You've just checkmated whoever you have to checkmate. Set the pieces up again. Time to start the status quo over and start a game anew.
And hope to God you're not playing against Kasparov.
Or Deep Blue.
But the problem is, instead of considering, so you guys gave that episode, you guys discussed great examples of what could be done in the Kree scroll thing. You could, the situation on Earth, now that everybody knows that there's aliens, the uncertainty, all of that builds to the invasion story. Now, great, but here's what happens instead. Let's introduce Adam Warlock at the end of like this random scene in Guardians of the Galaxy, and maybe we'll tell some crazy Infinity Watch story because that was the aftermath in the comic books. Well, no, come on, guys, that's just the garbage that you end up throwing at it. Dig at the bottom of the barrel and throw the garbage at it.
And so with the CW or heck with most of the DC heroes that are out there, really the only one that's doing any sort of numbers and it was good. I'm going to say it. I enjoyed Aquaman 1. That was a good movie.
I heard it was pretty decent, but I never got around to it.
I didn't either. I didn't watch it, but I heard it was decent.
Momoa knocked it out of the park. I'm going to say it that way. So if you can somehow get Momoa to agree to do a television series and tell a good story with it, totally give us some sort of Aquaman stuff.
I think you could I think you could talk him into going on HBO Max, and some of the DC stuff that's been on HBO Max has been decent. Peacemaker was much better than it had any right to be. Which I find especially hilarious given all the shit I said about John Cena during a good chunk of his wrestling career. But he, to his credit, is very good at deadpan humor.
I mean, there's a reason that the whole part of him poking his face out of the poster saying, "Are you sure about that?" is a meme.
And of course, but for those who are looking for this ideal equation when it comes to how to do superhero movies,
no such thing.
Don't. A phrase that my mentor often said to me is, "Art is not a math problem."
Thank you.
Although math can be artful.
Yes, it can.
Yes.
Now that doesn't mean that there. So me and Joseph Campbell in the hero's journey and how I feel about it. So it doesn't mean that there cannot be formula when it comes to the human story that we've been telling, and that human story works because it is just the human story. Okay, great. That doesn't mean it's a plug and play. And
didn't we just have this conversation earlier today, Monk? That the critique or lack thereof of the word "this is formulaic," it tells you exactly nothing.
I called it a milquetoast complaint.
Right.
Yeah.
Well,
you can apply
things can
formula.
be formulaic and still be good. It's a matter of adding in details that sharpen the characters and the plot.
A formula is a tool.
That's right.
And it's all about how you apply the tool.
Mm-hmm.
The same with tropes, the same with cliches,
Yep.
the same with anything else in media in general.
That's why Goblin Slayer is as compelling as it is to so many people, for the record. It is extremely formulaic, but they did it in a way that was interesting to people.
Right.
Not to mention it was based off of the author's batshit college D&D campaigns.
Yes, that too.
When it comes to some of the best stuff that's ever been done out there, if you ask enough questions, the person will come back to, well, yeah, during a campaign I played in a role-playing game. Yeah, of course.
In the end, there's no such thing as a magic bullet for this. There's no such thing as
Yes.
the surefire way.
No.
Because people change, tastes change, cultural zeitgeist changes.
That's right.
You have
As
to
they
adapt
always
with
have
them.
done.
And that's okay. You can adapt to them, and also you can just tell good stories. And a good story is timeless. We know that from a lot of the stuff that we love. So great. Tell a good story first and foremost, and the rest of it will fall into place.
Yeah. No, exactly. I apologize for doing this, but it's I'm working on a small game, a mini, just something to prove that I can do shit like that. And
Yes.
one of the main characters, there are four focal characters. I am incorrect. Forgetting the details of my own project. Good lord. But the male lead is homosexual, but it's never mentioned throughout the course of the game. He just happens to be gay. You know when it's mentioned? During the ending sequence, and he's asked what he wants to do with his life now. And he basically just says, find a nice strapping young man and run a farm together.
Brilliant.
That's it. He's just a character throughout the story because I think that's the way to handle it. I think it should be incidental. I was listening to you talking about tokenism earlier, and I was nodding my head like, yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's never should a single facet of a person be all that they are.
That's right.
Precisely.
That's why it's called a facet. It's a different face upon which to shine light.
Yeah, and for those of you who think of the word facet and think it's too vague, look at a gem.
That's right.
Look at a gemstone. You can see its many faces.
And the bigger picture part of that conversation to me is that the people who are doing the virtue signaling on those type of diversity inclusion things are wanting whatever they're trying to diversify and include to be normalized. Okay. You know how you normalize it? Don't say shit about it anymore. The fact that you say shit about it is what's creating the not normal.
Let me quote Morgan Freeman. If you want to get rid of racism, you stop calling me a black man, and I'll stop calling you a white man.
That's right.
Yep, I was just going to cite that same quote.
If I was in that same camp of virtue signalers, which first off I wouldn't have a career. Second off, I would be getting ridiculously offended at every black joke that I make, that Zan makes, and that a few of my colleagues have made. And yes, I tell them to fuck off, but it's an endearing form of fuck off.
That's right.
It's part of the lore of the monastery and the GeekWatch. It's just one of the many ways I bane him.
Mm-hmm. And when it comes, I remember.
I know you said bane, but I heard bang, and it made me giggle like a moron.
I would say keep your head out of the gutter, but that's impossible.
You know, Monk, what do we say about the shippers?
Oh no. People ship you too?
No.
I sure as fuck hope not. We're way too similar for that. No, thank you.
Thank you. Fair enough.
No, and anybody who's even thinking of that, I will have you keelhauled.
That is the appropriate response.
I will have you tied by your ankles to on a car on I-90 while they're going 90.
That's awesome.
A very quick and brutal way to go. I dig it.
Or I will have you go through the crash test, be a crash test dummy. And everybody will learn the importance of a seatbelt.
Yes.
If that sounds cruel, well, the punishment should fit the crime.
Indeed.
But I don't like ships. I sink ships.
Yeah, it's why I don't. I mean, I like to laugh at that stuff, but I avoid it largely.
I ruthlessly mock it.
Oh, we tease the shit out of all the shipper friends that we have.
Nice.
I know this isn't valid the judge, but here's my judgment on the CW. They got to let it go. They just got to let all these shows go. And don't touch it. If they're gonna not touch it, if they're gonna reboot or do anything, they really need to let it go for years. Meaning, don't touch it.
When I said reboot, what I meant was, move any sort of future any sort of DC superhero project onto either the big screen or HBO Max.
Yeah.
And honestly, silver screen stuff with DC tends to be pretty, except for very, very recently, it tended to be pretty get good responses, you know?
It gets good responses when it's made in good faith. Something like Aquaman was made in good faith.
As was the Zack Snyder cut of Justice League.
Yeah, so was the Suicide Squad, not the original one, not Suicide Squad, but the Suicide Squad.
Yes,
the one with King Shark was made quite well.
And incidentally, stuff like the James Gunn take on Suicide Squad is why I think that you can use D-list characters and make them work if you know know what you're doing. Because
you don't even have to know what you're doing. You just have to tell good stories.
And it's a lot of people, I think, really overcomplicate the idea of telling good stories. We have centuries of material to draw upon and/or rip off or steal from.
That's right.
And if you're gonna steal
from
the best.
That's right.
Like the fact that Monk wants to turn half of the stories we talk about into Stormlight Archives ripoffs.
And Ethereal saying that I really am a sea god. No.
Jeez.
The sea is not my environment. The winter is my environment.
Oh God, I love winter. I honestly don't enjoy spring and summer. I'm gonna get hanged for that, but it is what it is.
Monk and I welcome people to Fimbulwinter whenever they finally hit -20 or so.
Oh yeah, true.
Otherwise, we laugh at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so easy to stay warm in winter, but in the summer you got to worry about humidity. You got to worry about sweating.
You can always put on more than you can take off.
That's right.
Exactly.
You can always put on more, but there's a point where if you take off any more, you get arrested for indecent exposure.
Yeah.
Exactly.
No, what you should really do is go to a convention and say that you're cosplaying as the great scholar Archimedes.
Or you can just live in California like me, and they don't care.
You just show up in a banana hammock.
Monk, if I go as the great Archimedes, I'm going to embarrass everyone else there. They're going to look and be like, "Oh," and then look down and go, "Oh."
No. Wasn't he a consummate wrestler, though? Wouldn't you need to show up greased down and in a banana hammock?
I mean, if I do that, I'm not playing as Archimedes anymore. I'm playing Hakan from fucking Street Fighter.
True.
Still, they're both Grecian, so...
True. I forgot Hakan is Grecian.
So, at that point, though, I'm just... Everybody is embarrassed in my presence for obvious reasons. I'm 6'6".
Yeah.
And proportionate.
You're an enormous human being. I am a full foot shorter than you, Zangetsu.
Which means you're also a full foot shorter than Monk, because we're the same height.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I'm a manlet. It is what it is.
But when it comes to... I haven't heard any about any upcoming works on HBO Max when it comes to superhero stuff. But aside from the fact that there's some talk about some Arkham themed series on HBO Max in the works. I have no idea what that's going to entail. And even as far as Pattinson coming back for future Batman projects, I cannot take him at his word because he is a notorious troll.
He is.
He is a notorious troll, and he's also a better actor than everyone gives him credit for, because the only thing anybody ever seems to remember him for
Is Twilight.
Yes.
The film that he hates more than any of us ever will.
Yeah, he despises that movie, for those of you in the audience.
He despises all of the Twilight series. He says he hated acting in them. And
I feel like Hayden Christensen gets that same thing. The guy's a good actor, and he just because
everybody
of Star
remembers.
Wars,
Everybody remembers him
Anakin.
for hating sand and killing children. Yes,
That's right.
Yeah, but wasn't he in Pineapple Express?
He was in Pineapple Express, I believe, and what was that one? Something House Life, something. What was that? Oh, I can't even remember now. But it was a drama, but man, he was excellent in that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He learned to act.
Yeah, no, that's why I never understood why the character was so unlikable.
Yeah.
Because Hayden Christensen is a good actor. It sounds to me like he was directed by, forgive the outright statement, but morons. Like,
Why are you apologizing? Are you Canadian?
yes, I am actually.
Stereotypes! Hooray!
Yeah.
We're a whole temple full of stereotypes tonight.
Yes.
Everybody. The reason stereotypes persist is because there is some kernel of truth
Of course.
within them, just like with any other fairy tale.
Yes.
As much as some people would try and claim that that Terrence and Phillip is an offensive stereotype to Canadians.
Oh, God,
I know at least a few people who legitimately talk like that.
Yes, they are called Newfoundlanders.
I was about to say, I know a few Newfies who sound exactly like Terrence and Phillip.
And as annoyed as I get with the movie Fargo, I have plenty of people I know in my family who talk like that.
Yep.
Of course, if we're going to go with more Canadian stereotypes, we should always keep in mind the beloved Letterkenny.
Yes, Letterkenny is incredible. Absolutely wonderful show. Crave, you did a phenomenal job there. Thank you for putting that into the ether.
Yeah. But like I mentioned this in the past, whenever you're trying to whenever your design ethos is not a stereotype or not a trope or not anything, just pick something. You fucked yourself over right from the start.
Yeah, you don't want to pick what you're not doing. You want to pick what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. No, that's a fair point.
Oh.
Because what you're not doing doesn't really tell me anything other than what your limits are.
That and it tells me that you have no idea what you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But in lieu of that, the big reason why I take with a grain of salt whatever the future HBO Max plans are is I have a policy of trailers or get the fuck out. Because
and sometimes not even then, because trailers can be deceiving.
Yeah.
I think trailers are only useful when they show a clear portion of the beginning, portion of the middle, and portion of the end of a thing.
I'm not sure that's a good idea because you might end up spoiling your audience. But
I mean, you're not wrong, but by the same coin, it's just hard to take trailers seriously when they don't.
And welcome back, Jeremy. Sorry that I didn't see that.
What's that?
I thought you noticed it. So I didn't say anything.
You dropped and jumped back in.
Oh, I did. Oh, I didn't. Sorry about that. I think I was changing my icon. Is why.
That would certainly explain it.
Okay. I was tired of looking at your guys' cool icons, and I'm like, I don't have an icon.
Mine's not so much cool. It's a mentally handicapped Kratos drooling on himself.
Well, you know.
He decided to use an avatar of a fucking idiot.
Yeah. Because I am an idiot. It's the running gag among my friends.
But when it comes to what plans that they have, like I said, I'm taking things with a grain of salt until I see something. I think the reason that you haven't seen them go all in on trying to reestablish the Trinity is because like I said before, they need a captain.
Yeah, they do.
And until they find that, we're not going to see that happen. I do. As far as whether or not you're going to see that Trinity go all in on representation, I can't help but doubt it, because it seems that Zaslav is hell-bent on getting rid of every vanity project that he can find. Anything that is an investment that's not making returns, he wants to either minimize or get rid of, which is why a lot of the CW superhero projects have been getting the axe, I think, and also why DC Comics' headquarters got severely downsized in the last few months.
Yeah, most people are working from home at this juncture.
And there's been a bit of an ultimate. A lot of the people who are working there know that they're on thin ice because of the fact that he wants people to focus on comics that are actually going to make money.
Yep.
And given that, and we know the fact that the people that run what I call the club, in terms of the virtue signal part of the club, their shit's not drawing. Like, everybody, remember when everybody was talking up that one spy movie from earlier this year that was gonna be that had all female at its boasting? That sank like a bag of rocks.
Yep.
Ocean's 8. Nobody went to see Ocean's 8.
Yep.
For as much as people tried to gaslight, as much as people have been trying to gaslight on Top Gun Maverick and try and be political with it, it's making money.
Yep.
And let's not forget the most viewed televised event of the last 7 weeks. It had a male lead and a female lead who is bad at acting
and can't cry on command.
Oh God, yes, I know what you're joking about now. Good Lord.
What are you talking about, Monk? She cried on command when it comes to her reputation.
She can
I
sure
don't
get
know
cocaine
about
out of
that.
a Kleenex on command, though.
I don't know about that. I could. When I was watching that, I was looking at somebody. She is trying to cry, and nothing's coming.
Every time I saw her attempt to cry and she failed, it immediately came to mind of the old Windows 3.0 days, or 3.1 days, when you would try to run a program and it would fail to launch, and I'm like, oh, hello.
So, just remember, my dog stepped on a bee.
Oh God, yep.
But when it comes to this idea, I'm not. Because of that, I do think that there's gonna be at least be attempts to try and have Pattinson, Godot, and Cavill be the Trinity.
Okay.
I'm not. When I say attempts, I'm saying that I don't entirely know if that's how it would actually go down. And truth be told, the problem that I have with Gal Gadot is that she's akin to Arnie in the early '80s, in the sense that she has a very good presence, but she's not a very good speaking actress.
No, certainly not.
I don't know if she's had accent training, but if she has, then I think she should get a refund.
And yeah, and there's Wonder Woman as a character, Batman and Superman too. There is a likability to those characters that is really critical to the character, and Gal Gadot there's just something not in the likable category for me.
I think
she doesn't have the.
It just doesn't feel likable. I'm like, okay. I mean, you
She
look
has
like Wonder
everything
Woman,
but
and you.
the sort of personable nature of
Yes,
Diana.
personable. Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for.
She has the naivety of Diana. Because she's never seen the outside world. She has the courage of Diana. She has the strength of Diana.
Yeah.
But she completely lacks the sort of friendly undertone that Diana always had.
Always.
I'd say that's a consequence of DC feeling that they have to take themselves seriously.
This is again why I honestly don't like it when they grimdark existing characters. If you're going to grimdark, create
Imagine if they
tried
to grimdark the original Captain Marvel.
Oh God,
right.
Well. I'm glad they had the foresight to realize that should be half comedy.
Because, and I know some people are going to say his name's Shazam. No, his name is Shazam because of legal purposes.
Right.
Because of stupidity from Marvel.
Yeah, well, Marvel sued them for copyright, wasn't it?
No, that's not exactly what happened. Tangent warning. Captain Marvel, the one that everybody knows as Shazam, originally was not a DC character.
No,
it was a Carlton character. However, when DC decided to get Sue happy over what they called Superman ripoffs, that character was in the crossfire, even though the comparison isn't accurate. But eventually, Carlton had gone belly up for one reason or another. It's a long story.
And DC bought the character.
In the interim, first the name was purchased by a company that at the time was called Union Comics, who would later go on to become Marvel. Then the character the character and all the other Carlton characters were bought by DC.
That makes sense.
This is why there's that legal limbo when it comes to it. Marvel has the name Captain Marvel, but they don't have the character, which is why they had to keep putting out which is why they invented the Marvel character so that they could keep the rights. That's the gist of how it went. And
like I said, stupidity.
Right, stupidity.
And the reason why they have to go, that's the reason why they pivoted towards using the Shazam name. But I'd say I would say the big problem is that, as someone else had pointed out years ago, DC has a Batman problem. And because of how successful...
I love many of the side characters in Batman, but Batman himself, I'm not a huge fan. I'm more of a Shadow fan.
Wow, the Edge.
It is what it is.
Well, wait, wrong Shadow.
No, that's always applicable, Monk.
No, yeah, I know what Shadow he's referring to.
So do I.
But Shadow the Hedgehog.
Yes, Al the Edge.
Yes.
But the problem is because of how successful Batman was in the 80s, there's this idea of trying to lean into that. Like, you know how we said that CW keeps trying to lean into the evening soap opera shit that they've been successful with in the WB days.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
You have that same problem where you have a bunch of people who the only success that they know is Batman, and because of that, they want to try and transplant that kind of thing onto other properties where it doesn't fit.
Yeah, honestly, they made it focused. Excuse me, I didn't hiccup there. They made it focus too heavily on the soap opera aspect of the heroes instead of focusing on characterization and plot. They were much more interested in creating drama between the characters.
Mm-hmm.
And the characters never seemed to learn anything from that drama. because they continually make the same mistakes every season.
Mm-hmm. And I'm pretty sure you all remember the definition of wait, before that, Ethereal's saying like Marvel with Wolverine and Spider-Man. Not exactly. There's I don't Marvel has not quintupled down on one particular archetype like that in that same sense. There's been plenty of exposure to both characters, but I wouldn't say that they try and make other characters like them. The Marvel problem is, as we've talked about in the past, death by quippage. But
yeah, they take the joke thing too far in many cases.
Mm-hmm. And I would say that with CW, if I'm being honest, I don't have a whole lot of hope for the network as a whole. I know that they were looking for a buyer a couple years ago. I don't know, and it doesn't look like there are any takers, because the problem is the way that they do things is a relic.
It is.
It is a relic of the way network television worked in the late 90s and early 2000s. They haven't adapted. And granted, I'm not. I do feel like the streaming bubble is going to be bursting soon. At least when it comes to those that don't have established names that they can build around. But other networks are able to sustain themselves. Usually through the fact that they have that you look at certain other networks, like let's say TNT. Now, putting aside the fact that they have live events, which is what really draws ratings these days. The exclusive shows that they have are in that serialized style. And Ethereal brings up the CW's take on Kung Fu. I didn't even know that was a thing until about 10 hours ago.
Well, they even made a series about this relatively new, completely unknown character, Naomi.
Yeah, and nobody knew who the hell Naomi was, and when it got canceled, as I made clear, everybody was like, "Who the fuck is that?"
Yeah, that I still don't know who Naomi is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not even being hyperbolic here. I legitimately don't know who that character is.
And if you want to introduce a character that people aren't as familiar with, there is a way to do it, but you have to actually sell me on the character.
Agreed.
And a case in point, are any of you familiar with the Marvel Knights line of comics?
I read it so long ago.
Yeah,
yes,
that's a long time ago.
The story with that was the heads of Malibu Comics had approached Marvel saying, "Hey, I know you guys are struggling with comic book production, but we've got state-of-the-art printing presses, and we'll take some characters off your hands if you're cool with it. Just basically outsource the characters to us." They didn't get any big names for that. They got the Punisher, Daredevil, Black Panther, and the Inhumans.
Yeah. Now I remember it.
And
no, they were good stories though, from what I remember.
3 out of 4 of them were good. In the first wave. The Inhumans run managed to win an Eisner when Eisners actually were relevant.
And not an indicator that you obey the tribe.
And the thing is, only hardcore Fantastic Four fans might have known who the hell the Inhumans were before then. The Daredevil run was put up there with the Frank Miller run with how good it was, and this was where they further established the whole thing of Black Panther being king of a country. The only one.
So that's where that's where Wakanda, King of Wakanda largely comes from. Then
Yeah,
the Malibu
I
run.
I don't like Wakanda, but that's a whole other story.
No, I mean I don't like the fictitious nature of Wakanda either. So that's fair.
But the only one that was a bit of a dud was the Punisher story, where they decided, hey, Punisher was ridiculously overexposed and had 3 solo books in the 90s. Let's go a more supernatural route with the Punisher. Yeah,
Punisher went
it didn't.
supernatural at one point.
Yeah, Punisher Redemption was. It wasn't a bad story, but Punisher felt ridiculously out of place.
Gotcha.
Then they rebooted it again, gave it to Garth Ennis, and was more back to basics, which did.
I
much
remember
better.
the art style was good, really good for that.
Ennis was responsible for the Max run, wasn't he, on Punisher?
He may have been. I try not to think about the Max run for various reasons, and as far as why going with a more supernatural route with the Punisher, I think the reason was if we do that Punisher was ridiculously overexposed in the typical way in the 90s, so maybe for this version we should try and do something different.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a bold bet, but sometimes you bet on black.
I mean,
that's what the what if scenarios were for. I don't really understand why they needed to put it in 616. They could have done it in the what if.
But well, this is around the time that Image Comics was still a thing, right? Because Malibu was around the same time, and so you had Jim Lee creating that character that was semi-Punisherish. What was his name? The Killer.
Do you mean God? He was an antagonist to Spawn briefly. I know who you're talking about. He had the skull on his face. The skull.
Chapel.
Yes, correct.
Chapel. Thank you.
Oh no, not Chapel. I know who you're talking about. I'm talking about he had like red marks on either side of his face. It was Jim Lee's like dark comic. He's like, I'm gonna do a dark comic. So he had Wildcats and then he did this guy. But the redemption version of Punisher felt like that guy.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, out of place. But the key thing is, I do think we will see the Trinity in some form. Whether or not it's a shared universe is another matter. But when it comes to CW, I really think that they should just stick to, if they're going to be adamant about putting what they know into things that doesn't belong, maybe they're better served sticking to what they do know.
Yeah.
couldn't hurt.
It certainly can't be any worse. I know that there's talk of the Gotham Knights thing, which already looks like shit. Both the video game version and the TV thing, which that's a good way to create some brand confusion, if you ask me.
Oh, do you mean the Sabretooth ripoff with the red bodysuit, exposed chest, and the black ponytail? Sorry, going back to the Jim Lee character.
We'll probably end up covering that another day if we ever talk about Image.
Yeah, fair.
But I think that the CW should stick to those sorts of dramas and just middle along, because I honestly think that they're going to go out with a whimper simply because nobody's going to want to buy.
Yeah. But the larger issue with those shows, I find, is they're not. It's not simply that they're formulaic; it's that they're designed by committee, and that's a terrible way to engage in creativity.
Yeah, but I think we've talked about that before, where when where we've come, not just in media but as society, that having a captain is a bad thing, and it's just not.
No,
especially when you're trying to accomplish something like this.
Yes.
If anything, we've seen that this whole idea of everybody gets a vote usually results in the lowest common denominator.
Correct.
A lot of people dislike Jim Shooter, but I think he did a lot of good.
I feel bad for Jim Shooter because he got screwed over like 3 different times.
He did. And the thing I wanted to say about him is he did a lot of good for organization, for captaining the ship when he was doing his job.
Mm-hmm.
He was a net benefit to comics.
And I would say that he was especially good. He especially showed his strengths of captaining the ship with the chaos that was Valiant.
Yes, very much so.
But I think that about covers it when it comes to this particular topic. We've exhausted it, and we've kind of gone off the rails a few times, but in a fun way.
That's my apology. That's my bad.
No. Do not apologize.
I think very tangentially.
No. We tangent like this all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no. I know you do. I'm just saying, like, that's that's on me.
Yeah.
I derail every conversation I'm a part of. It's just what I do.
If I do it, does it look like we stick to a script around here?
No, fair. That's fair.
That's why I'm saying don't apologize.
Yes, that's fair.
Now, next week we will be doing Geek Watch a little bit earlier than normal because we have to account for the schedules of our guests, since we'll be tackling the next part of the Reconstructing Ruby project.
Oh, cool!
And
I definitely have to listen in on that one.
This Tuesday, we'll be doing a discussion regarding the combat trailer and just what we know with Final Fantasy 16. And I myself will be doing a handful of interviews with some new faces and some returning faces throughout the week. I don't plan on doing any double features, and of course, on Friday, will be the return of the Valley of the Judged.
Nice.
Nice.
Hopefully, we won't have any spammers. Although we didn't have any spammers tonight.
Yeah, I think the one hashtag that did it last time is what people were saying.
Yeah, I've learned my lesson. I'm not going to repeat that mistake.
Was that you, Mildred?
Well, we were last Friday we covered the first part of our review of Magi Knights, which is a very extensive overhaul, 5e hack overhaul of into a Magical Girls / Super Sentai-esque game.
Nice.
And hashtag Magical Girl was there.
I saw the post. I just haven't watched it yet.
Mm-hmm. And
Deathblow is the name of the character. Deathblow.
Yeah. And of course there'll be plenty other surprises and bits of insanity do come about throughout here in the temple. But until then, on behalf of the good brothers present and not present, my name is Mildra. I am your gaming monk, and join the watch.